Hi everyone. Today let's go ahead and proceed with our third lesson in Computer Programming 11B. So today we will be learning about classes and objects. So for today, we will be learning about classes and objects and how to create a class. So when you think in an object-oriented manner, especially in Java programming, everything will be considered as an object, and those object is actually a member of a class. Now, the difference between a class and an object parallels the difference between abstract and concrete. So when we say abstract, that means it's an abstract. There is actually no way for you to understand it. It's an abstract. While concrete, meaning it's complete, you can actually explain it. You can somehow interpret it. So an object is an instantiation of a class or one tangible example of a class. Now, the concept of a class, however, is useful because of its reusability. So when you actually created a class in Java programming, there is actually a possibility, or not only a possibility, but it's really possible for you to reuse a specific class that you have created. And those objects gain their attributes from their classes. And all objects have predictable attributes because they are members of certain classes. Now, in Java programming and other programming languages, sometimes when you create classes, okay, you can actually instantiate objects from them. And other times, you create classes to run as applications. Sometimes you write classes that do both of them. So you could call an application or class that instantiates objects of another class what we call a class client, or what we call class user. Now you can identify a class that is an application because it contains a public static void main method, just like what we are doing. So you will also write and use many classes that do not contain a main method, and these classes can be used by other classes that are applications or applets. So in the long run, especially in CP11B, it really focuses on the concept of object-oriented programming, where we will be creating several classes. And imagine this, we can actually call and instantiate several objects and their attributes from the classes that we have created as well. So a Java application can contain only one method with the header public static void main string. Now, if you write a class that imports another class and both classes have a public main method, your application will not compile. Now, let's proceed on how to create a class. So, creating a class in Java programming, you must assign what we call a name. It's actually like the way how we create or declare a variable, and you must determine what specific data and methods will be part of the classes. So, let's take a look at this one. We have three different parts of a class: optional access specifier, keyword class, and any legal identifier you choose for the name. So as I have said, when we say identifier, these are actually the names that you can give to your classes, to your variables, to your method names, and it starts with an uppercase letter. But then it's only conventional, so meaning it all depends on the users, on the user itself. So if you want to start your classes with a lowercase, it's okay. But then it's conventional to start your class with an uppercase. So for example here, public class. So once again, we have three different parts: the access specifier, the keyword class, and any legal identifier. So what you're seeing here, the public, that is an access specifier, just like what we have discussed from methods itself. So the most liberal form of access is public. That means when we say public, you are declaring your class to be accessible to or by anyone of the package itself. When I say package, well, imagine this one. You have a single application And one application can actually contain several number of classes. And each classes, you can actually control and access them and to call that inherit the attributes of those classes. So the keyword public is a class modifier, and classes that are public are accessible by all objects. So public classes also can be extended or used as a basis for any other class. Now, once you're done writing the public class employee, which is considered as the header, you now write the body of the employee class between a set of curly braces. This is not actually new to everyone because we are always doing this since the start of our programming classes. So the body contains the data and methods for the class. So the data components of a class are often referred to as what we call data fields. So to help distinguish them from other variables you might use. So here's an example of a code here. So we have public class employee. We actually, what do you call this one? We know how to create a main method inside the class, right? So this time, we use a specific access specifier while declaring a particular variable, which is empnum. So we have here private. We will be discussing the difference between public and private in the next part of our discussion. So the data field empnum is not preceded by the keyword static. Now, remember this. If the keyword static had been inserted there, that means from the word static, only one employee number value will be shared by all employee objects that are eventually instantiated. Well, for you to better understand what I have said here, when we included private static, the word static here, meaning the value inside the empnum will always be the same value as it is. Okay, so for example, here we have private static int empnum. Value would be shared by all employee objects. So whatever value you have inserted here as a value of empnum, when you included a static, it can now be shared. So that's a static. It cannot be changed. It's always there. When you eventually create or instantiate objects from the class, each employee can have its own unique employee number. And each object gets its own copy of each non-static data field. So this time, here is an example of a non-static data field. Non-static, that means you can also give another value for employee number. So a non-static field like empnum is an instance variable for the class. Now, assigning private access to a field means that no other classes can access the field's values, and only methods of the same class are allowed to set, to get, or otherwise use private variables. We will be having a discussion regarding with the set-get methods. So in creating private access, so it's what we call information hiding. Now we will be having a sample program that can actually, that you have to have, or you have to create in order for you to understand deeply the difference between private and public classes. Okay, so a class private's data can be changed or manipulated only by a class's own methods and not by methods that belong to other classes. So, say for example, you have two different classes, and one of the classes you have created, you have declared that as a private class. That means the class which was set as a private class, okay, can only be accessed by the methods inside of that. Okay, understood? Meanwhile, if you have declared a public class, meaning all of the public classes from other different methods, different classes, have the power to access all the methods from that particular class. So basically, 1:1 for private classes. So, summary, a class's data field are most often private and not static. So the exception occurs when you want to use a non-changing value without being required to create an object. So if that's the case, you can actually create or make the field both static and final. Now, for example, we have I don't know if you have tried this, but then the Java math class, it contains a final, public, and static field named pi, meaning when we added a final, that means that's the final value of that particular class. Just like in Java math. Okay? Pi cannot be changed. It's only static. It cannot be dynamic. It's not changing. Right? So you will learn about the math classes in the next chapter. So do we have any questions? Thank you so much. That's the end of our discussion.